Some truths don't stay buried. Sometimes they wait quietly in the eyes of a child. The iron gates of the Calloway estate rolled open just after 8 o'clock on a gray Monday morning. A light mist hung over the sprawling property, softening the edges of the massive stone mansion that sat at the end of the winding driveway. Nia Brooks tightened her grip on the leather strap of her bag as the rideshare pulled to a stop beneath the covered entrance. For a moment, she remained seated, staring through the window. She had worked in beautiful homes before. She had cared for children from families whose names appeared in magazines and financial journals. But something about this place felt different. Quieter. Heavier. As if the walls themselves were holding secrets. The driver unloaded her suitcase and pulled away. The sound of tires faded into the distance, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a fountain somewhere beyond the gardens. Nia took a slow breath and climbed the front steps. The door opened before she could knock. A house manager greeted her politely and led her through a grand foyer lined with marble floors and towering windows. Morning light streamed through the glass, painting pale silver patterns across the floor. "Mr. Calloway is in a meeting," the woman explained. "But Noah is in the family room. We thought it would be best if you met him first." Nia smiled professionally and nodded. Of course. They moved through a series of elegant hallways. Expensive artwork covered the walls. Everything was immaculate, ordered, controlled. Yet the silence felt unusual for a house with a child. No laughter, no cartoons, no footsteps racing across hardwood floors. When they reached the family room, the manager stopped and gently pushed open the door. "Noah," she called softly, "your new nanny is here." Nia stepped inside. At first, she noticed only the sunlight. It poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a lake behind the property. Then she saw the child sitting cross-legged on a rug near the fireplace. A little boy, maybe 5 years old. He was focused on building a tower from wooden blocks. His small hands moved carefully, patiently. The manager smiled. "Noah." The boy looked up. Time stopped. Nia forgot how to breathe. Her heart slammed once against her ribs and then seemed to disappear altogether. The room blurred around the edges. The sunlight, the furniture, the walls. Everything faded except the child. Noah rose slowly to his feet. Dark curls framed his face. His skin carried a warm golden brown tone. His eyes were wide and curious. But none of that was what shattered her world. Hanging around his neck was a tiny silver bracelet attached to a thin chain. Nia felt the blood drain from her face. No. Her mind rejected the sight immediately. Impossible. Her fingers trembled. The bracelet was small and worn from years of use. A tiny engraved moon charm dangled from one side. There were scratches near the clasp. Tiny imperfections nobody else would ever notice. Nobody except the woman who had bought it. Nobody except the woman who had fastened it around her newborn son's wrist 5 years earlier. The room tilted. Her stomach tightened. She remembered standing in a hospital room under dim lights. She remembered holding that bracelet in her palm. She remembered whispering a promise to the tiny baby sleeping beside her. And she remembered being told that she would never bring him home. "Miss Brooks?" the manager asked gently. Nia blinked. The room snapped back into focus. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Nia said quickly. "Too quickly. I'm sorry. Long flight." The manager seemed satisfied and excused herself. The moment the door closed, silence settled between Nia and the little boy. Noah studied her with surprising intensity. Children usually smiled or hid behind furniture during first introductions. Noah did neither. He simply stared, as though he were trying to remember something. Nia fought to keep her expression calm. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She told herself there had to be an explanation. Thousands of silver bracelets existed in America. Thousands of moon charms. This could not mean what she feared it meant. It could not. Yet she could not look away. Noah took a small step closer. Then another. His eyes never left hers. "Hi," Nia said softly. The boy's expression brightened. Not with recognition exactly. With comfort. Familiarity. Like someone spotting a face from a dream. "Hi," he replied. His voice was small and gentle. Nia swallowed hard. "I'm Nia." Noah continued staring. Then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that arrived slowly, naturally, without hesitation. The smile of a child who felt safe. "I know," he said. A chill traveled down her spine. "You do?" Noah nodded. "I think so." He tilted his head. "You look familiar." Nia's throat tightened. She should have laughed. She should have redirected the conversation. Instead, she found herself kneeling to his eye level. "Have we met before?" she asked. Noah considered the question carefully. Then he shook his head. Not really. The answer should have relieved her. It didn't. The little boy reached up absent-mindedly and touched the silver bracelet hanging around his neck. The exact bracelet she remembered fastening onto tiny fingers years ago. Nia felt tears threaten the corners of her eyes. She forced them back immediately. Noah noticed none of it. He simply smiled again and held out one small hand. "Will you help me finish my tower?" he asked. Nia stared at the tiny hand suspended between them. Somewhere deep inside her chest, something long buried stirred awake. Not hope. Hope was too dangerous. Something older, stronger. A feeling that had survived grief, survived years of unanswered questions, survived every attempt to move on. Slowly, she reached for his hand. The moment their fingers touched, the silver bracelet caught the morning sunlight and flashed like a signal from the past. And for the first time in 5 years, Nia Brooks allowed herself to ask the question she had forbidden herself from asking. What if her son had never truly been gone? The rest of the morning passed in a strange blur for Nia. She helped Noah finish his block tower, read him 2 picture books, and sat beside him while he carefully colored a page filled with cartoon animals. On the surface, everything looked ordinary. A nanny and a child getting acquainted. Yet beneath every smile and every gentle exchange, her thoughts raced faster than she could control. She kept noticing little things. The way Noah tilted his head when he concentrated. The way he pressed his lips together when he was trying to solve a problem. The way his eyes softened whenever he looked at her. None of those details should have meant anything. Children shared habits. Children developed expressions from the people around them. But each observation felt like another thread pulling her toward a truth she was afraid to touch. Around noon, Noah climbed onto a stool at the kitchen island while one of the staff members prepared lunch. Sunlight streamed through the enormous windows overlooking the lake. The water shimmered like polished glass beneath the pale sky. Noah swung his legs back and forth while Nia sat beside him. "Do you like dinosaurs?" he asked suddenly. Nia smiled. "Most little boys do. I know every dinosaur." His eyes brightened with pride, even the ones with the really hard names. "That is impressive. Mr. Ethan says I am a genius." Nia noticed the way he said Ethan instead of Dad. The observation settled quietly in her mind. "And what do you think?" she asked. Noah considered the question seriously. "I think I am good at remembering things." Then he looked directly at her. "I remembered you." The words landed softly, yet they sent a chill through her. Nia forced herself to remain calm. "You said that earlier." Noah nodded. "I know. Where do you think you remember me from?" He frowned slightly. "I do not know." His small fingers touched the silver bracelet again. "Just somewhere." Before she could respond, footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Staff members straightened. Conversation stopped. Nia turned toward the doorway. A tall man entered carrying a tablet in one hand and a phone in the other. He looked exactly like the photograph she had seen during the hiring process. Ethan Calloway. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored. His expression was controlled, almost unreadable. Yet there was something tired in his eyes. Something lonely. Noah immediately brightened. "Mr. Ethan." Ethan looked up from his tablet and smiled faintly. The change was subtle, but genuine. "Hey, buddy." Noah hopped down from the stool and ran over. Ethan rested a hand on the boy's shoulder before glancing toward Nia. "Miss Brooks." "Mr. Calloway." Their eyes met for the first time. Nia had prepared herself for this meeting. She had rehearsed professional responses during the flight. But standing here now, she felt strangely unsettled. Ethan looked nothing like the villain her fear wanted him to be. He looked exhausted, like a man carrying disappointments he never discussed. "I hope Noah is not giving you trouble," he said. "Not at all." "Good." His gaze shifted briefly toward the bracelet around Noah's neck. "He never takes that thing off." Nia's pulse quickened. "Do you know where it came from?" Ethan shook his head. "It was listed among his belongings when the adoption was finalized." He said it casually, matter-of-factly, as if discussing a toy or an extra pair of shoes. But for Nia, the words echoed through her chest. Among his belongings. The bracelet had stayed with him all these years. Somehow, some way. Ethan checked his watch. "I have another meeting in 10 minutes. Noah looked disappointed. Ethan noticed immediately. Movie tonight. Noah's face lit up. Promise. Promise. The little boy grinned. Ethan squeezed his shoulder and started toward the door. Then he paused. For a brief moment, his eyes returned to Nia. Thank you for being here. The sincerity surprised her. Before she could respond, he was gone. Silence settled again. Noah climbed back onto his stool and resumed eating lunch. Nia watched him carefully. Every answer she needed seemed hidden somewhere inside this house. Somewhere inside old records and forgotten documents. Somewhere inside the story of how a child with her bracelet had ended up here. Later that afternoon, while Noah napped, Nia stood alone beside the lake. A cold breeze rippled across the water. She rapped? That evening, the mansion seemed quieter than before. The last traces of daylight faded beyond the lake, leaving soft reflections dancing across the windows. Nia stood in the kitchen preparing a simple dinner for Noah while the scent of baked chicken and roasted vegetables filled the air. She moved carefully through familiar motions, grateful for the distraction. Every moment she spent thinking about the bracelet only deepened the questions already consuming her. Across the room, Noah sat at the counter coloring another page. His tongue peeked out slightly whenever he concentrated. Every so often, he glanced toward her, smiling as if he had known her much longer than a single day. Do you always smile at people that much? Nia asked gently. Noah shrugged. Not everybody. Just me. Yes. He returned to coloring. You make the house feel different. The comment caught her off guard. Different how? Noah thought for a moment. Warmer. Nia lowered her eyes toward the cutting board. Something tightened inside her chest. Children often notice things adults missed. They sensed loneliness. They sensed comfort. Yet hearing those words from him felt strangely personal. Before she could respond, footsteps approached from the hallway. Ethan entered the kitchen, loosening his tie. The fatigue in his face was more visible now. Long hours and endless responsibility seemed to cling to him like a second shadow. Noah immediately brightened. Movie night. Ethan smiled faintly. I remember. He set his phone on the counter and glanced toward the dinner plates. Something smells good. I hope so, Nia replied. Otherwise we are all in trouble. A brief laugh escaped him. It was the first genuine sign of warmth she had seen from him. For a moment, he looked less like a billionaire executive and more like an ordinary man trying to get through another day. During dinner, Noah filled every silence with stories about dinosaurs, cartoons, and imaginary adventures. Ethan listened attentively, though he spoke very little himself. Nia noticed something else. Whenever Noah addressed him, he still used his first name. Never dad. Never father. The distance lingered there, quiet but undeniable. After the meal, they settled into the family room for the promised movie. Noah insisted that Nia sit beside him on the couch. Halfway through the film, his head gradually drifted onto her shoulder. Within minutes, he was asleep. Nia remained perfectly still. The warmth of the child's small frame against her side awakened emotions she had spent years burying. She carefully brushed a curl away from his forehead. Ethan watched from the opposite end of the couch. Neither spoke for several seconds. The movie continued playing softly in the background. He does not usually trust people this quickly, Ethan finally said. Nia glanced toward him. Maybe he is just friendly. Ethan shook his head. Noah is kind, but cautious. His eyes moved to the sleeping boy. With you, it was immediate. Nia swallowed carefully. Children can surprise us. Ethan studied her expression for a moment before looking away. I suppose they can. The conversation ended there. Yet the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Later, after Noah had been carried upstairs and tucked into bed, Nia found herself unable to sleep. The guest room assigned to her overlooked the lake. Moonlight spilled across the water, turning the surface silver. She sat at the small desk near the window and opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. 5 years ago, she had tried to investigate. She had requested records, asked questions, pushed for answers. Every attempt had ended in frustration and dead ends. Eventually, grief had exhausted her. She had stopped searching because continuing to search hurt more than accepting uncertainty. Tonight was different. Tonight she had seen proof with her own eyes. Slowly, she typed the name of the hospital where she had delivered her baby. Old memories surfaced immediately. The labor room, the nurses, the paperwork, the conversations she barely remembered through exhaustion and heartbreak. Then one particular detail returned unexpectedly. A woman, well-dressed, not medical staff. She had visited briefly during the final hours before delivery. At the time, Nia had assumed she worked for administration. The memory had seemed insignificant. Until now, Nia searched through archived staff directories and public records. Minutes passed, then nearly an hour. Finally, a photograph appeared on her screen. Her breath caught. The woman looked older now, but there was no mistaking her face. Vanessa Whitmore, director of a major children's foundation, the same foundation that had helped coordinate countless adoptions across several states. Nia stared at the image. Her pulse quickened. The coincidence felt impossible. She quickly opened additional articles. Awards, charity galas, adoption advocacy campaigns, smiling photographs beside wealthy families and grateful parents. Everything about Vanessa Whitmore projected trust, compassion, respectability. Yet a deep unease settled over Nia. She remembered seeing that face before Noah was born. She was certain of it. Outside, a breeze rippled across the dark lake. Inside the room, the glow of the laptop illuminated her expression as another realization slowly took shape. For 5 years, she had believed her story ended in a hospital room. But perhaps that had only been the beginning. And somewhere between that night and Noah's arrival at the Calloway estate, Vanessa Whitmore had been standing in the shadows of both stories. Sleep never truly came that night. Nia lay in bed listening to the distant sound of water moving across the lake and the occasional creak of the old mansion settling into silence. Every time she closed her eyes, memories returned. By dawn, she gave up trying. She slipped out of bed and walked quietly downstairs. The house was still asleep. Pale morning light stretched across the marble floors. She carried a mug of coffee into a small sitting room overlooking the gardens and opened her laptop again. The photograph of Vanessa Whitmore remained on the screen. Nia stared at it for a long moment. The more she looked, the more certain she became. 5 years earlier, during the most important night of her life, she had seen that woman. At the time, she had been exhausted and overwhelmed. Details had blurred together. Faces had faded. But not this one. The memory slowly sharpened. She remembered a calm voice, an expensive coat, a reassuring smile that felt strangely rehearsed. She remembered asking who she was. Someone had answered that she was helping coordinate family services. After that, everything became difficult to piece together. Nia rubbed her temples. She hated how much of that night remained fragmented. Yet one thing stood out clearly. Vanessa Whitmore had been there before Nia was informed that her baby was gone. A quiet sound interrupted her thoughts. Footsteps. She quickly lowered the laptop screen. Noah appeared in the doorway wearing dinosaur pajamas and carrying a stuffed bear beneath one arm. His curls were tousled from sleep. "You are awake early," Nia said softly. Noah nodded. "Bad dream." Her heart immediately softened. "Do you want to talk about it?" He climbed onto the sofa beside her. "I dreamed I was lost." Nia placed a gentle hand over his. "You are not lost." Noah looked down at their hands touching. "I know." Then he added something that made her chest tighten. "I do not feel lost when you are here." Nia looked away toward the garden before emotion could reach her eyes. She told herself again that she needed answers before allowing herself to believe anything. Feelings were not proof. Hope was not proof. Yet every hour with Noah made the wall around her heart harder to maintain. Later that morning, after breakfast, Ethan informed them that Noah had an annual pediatric appointment scheduled in town. It should not take long, he said while checking messages on his phone. The doctor likes to monitor his growth and development every year. Noah groaned dramatically. Doctors ask too many questions. Ethan almost smiled. That is literally their job. An hour later they arrived at a private medical clinic. The waiting room was bright and modern, filled with large windows and comfortable chairs. Ethan stepped away briefly to take a business call, leaving Nia and Noah together. Noah flipped through a picture book while she completed some routine paperwork handed to her by the receptionist. Most of it was standard information. Emergency contacts, allergies, medical history. Then her eyes stopped moving. Under family medical history, several fields were marked unknown. She expected that, but another line caught her attention. Blood type, B negative. Nia stared at the page. Her pulse quickened. B negative was uncommon. She knew that because it was her blood type. Coincidences happened. She understood that. Yet another coincidence was becoming harder to ignore. She carefully returned the paperwork before anyone noticed her reaction. During the appointment, the pediatrician reviewed Noah's growth charts and praised his progress. Everything appeared healthy. Everything appeared normal. But while the doctor spoke, Nia found herself studying Noah's profile. The shape of his jaw, the curve of his smile. Tiny details she had never allowed herself to imagine after losing her child. On the drive home, Ethan remained unusually quiet. Eventually, he glanced at Noah through the rearview mirror. "How was school yesterday?" Noah shrugged. "Fine." Ethan nodded. "Just fine." Another shrug. The other kids were talking about their dads. Silence filled the vehicle. Nia watched Ethan's expression change almost imperceptibly. "And?" Ethan asked gently. Noah stared out the window. "I told them I do not have one." The words seemed to remove all sound from the car. Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he finally spoke. "You have people who love you." Noah nodded. "I know." Ethan looked forward again. His voice became quieter. "Sometimes that matters more." Nia turned toward the passing scenery outside her window, but her thoughts remained fixed on the exchange. Something deeper existed beneath Ethan's calm exterior. Something painful. The story he told the world about adoption and family felt incomplete. As the mansion came into view beyond the trees, Nia felt the pieces moving closer together. Vanessa Whitmore, the bracelet, the blood type, Noah's unexplained connection to her, and now the sadness she had glimpsed inside Ethan whenever the subject of family surfaced. Somewhere within those pieces lay the truth. She could feel it waiting just beyond reach. The following week settled into a rhythm that should have felt ordinary. Mornings began with breakfast overlooking the lake. Afternoons were filled with homework, games, and long walks through the gardens. Evenings often ended with Noah curled up beside Nia while she read stories before bed. Yet beneath the surface, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every day brought another detail she could not explain away. Every day made it harder to believe that fate alone had placed her inside this house. One afternoon, clouds drifted slowly across the sky as Noah sat at the dining table working on a family tree project from school. Colored pencils were scattered everywhere. Sheets of construction paper covered most of the tabletop. Nia was helping organize supplies when Noah looked up from his assignment. "I do not know what to put here," he said. She walked closer. He pointed toward a blank section labeled Family History. Her smile softened. "Maybe ask Mr. Ethan when he gets home." Noah frowned. "He does not know. He might know more than you think." Noah shook his head. "The papers say unknown." The words immediately caught her attention. "What papers?" "The adoption papers." Noah colored another branch on the tree. "I saw them once." Nia carefully lowered herself into the chair beside him. "You saw your adoption papers?" "By accident." His voice remained casual. "I was looking for crayons." Nia forced herself to stay calm. "And what did they say?" Noah shrugged. "Not much." Then he added something that made her heartbeat quicken. "There was a picture." "A picture?" "A lady." He looked up. "I think she looked like you." The room suddenly felt very still. Nia stared at him. "Are you sure?" Noah nodded slowly. "Maybe." His small shoulders lifted. "I only saw it for a second." Before she could ask another question, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway echoed outside. Noah immediately abandoned the project and ran toward the front hallway. Ethan had returned. Nia remained seated for a moment, trying to process what she had just heard. A photograph. A woman who resembled her. Adoption documents. None of it made sense. Yet the pieces continued moving in the same direction. That evening, after dinner, Ethan surprised Noah by suggesting a game of basketball on the private court behind the mansion. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. Nia sat on a nearby bench watching them play. Noah laughed each time he missed a shot. Ethan laughed too. It was a different side of him. Relaxed. Human. Unburdened by board meetings and responsibilities. Then something happened that caught Nia's attention. Noah tripped slightly while chasing the ball. He was not hurt, but Ethan reacted instantly. He crossed the court in seconds and crouched beside him. "Are you okay?" Noah nodded. "I am fine." Yet Ethan still examined him carefully before allowing him to continue. The concern in his eyes was unmistakable. It was not obligation. It was not duty. It was love. Real love. Watching them together stirred conflicting emotions inside Nia. If Noah truly was her son, Then Ethan had unknowingly given him a safe home. He had protected him, cared for him, loved him. That realization complicated everything. Later that night, while Noah slept, Nia passed the library and noticed light beneath the partially open door. Ethan sat alone at a large desk surrounded by shelves filled with books. Several files were spread before him. He looked exhausted. "Working late?" she asked softly. Ethan glanced up. "Occupational hazard." She smiled faintly. "You should get some rest." Eventually, his eyes drifted toward a framed photograph sitting on the desk. Nia followed his gaze. The picture showed a much younger Ethan standing beside an older couple. His parents, she assumed. Something in his expression changed. A sadness she had seen before returned. "My father used to say that success solves everything," he said quietly. Turns out he was wrong. Nia remained silent. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You can buy houses, companies, cars, planes, but there are some things money cannot fix." His voice grew softer. The next few days brought an unexpected change. Noah became unusually tired. At first, it seemed harmless. He yawned more often during breakfast. He asked for quiet time instead of running through the gardens. One afternoon, while building a puzzle in the family room, he simply rested his head against Nia's arm and closed his eyes. The moment lasted only a few minutes, but it was enough to concern her. As a former pediatric nurse, she noticed details most people missed. The slight paleness beneath his eyes, the way he rubbed his wrists when he felt drained, the decrease in his usual energy. Nothing alarming, nothing urgent, yet enough to pay attention. That evening, Nia mentioned it to Ethan while Noah slept upstairs. They stood near the lake after dinner, watching the last light disappear beyond the water. "He has been more tired than usual," she said carefully. Ethan immediately looked concerned. "Do you think something is wrong?" "Probably not. Children go through phases. Growth spurts can affect energy levels." She paused. "But I think it would be good to monitor him." Ethan nodded without hesitation. "Whatever he needs." His answer came so quickly that it revealed something deeper than concern. It revealed fear. Nia noticed it immediately. Ethan stared across the dark water for several seconds before speaking again. "I spent years believing I would never have a family." His voice was quiet. "Then Noah came into my life." He swallowed. "Sometimes I still worry that I will lose him." Nia felt her chest tighten. "You love him." Ethan looked away. More than anything. The honesty surprised both of them. For a moment, neither spoke. The night air moved gently through the trees surrounding the estate. Somewhere in the distance, a fountain continued its endless rhythm. Eventually, Ethan forced a faint smile. "Listen to me." Acting like an anxious parent. Nia smiled softly. "That is because you are one." Ethan did not answer. Yet something in his expression suggested the words mattered more than he would admit. 2 mornings later, Noah woke with a mild fever. Nothing severe, nothing dangerous, but enough to justify another visit to the pediatric clinic. By noon, they were sitting inside a private examination room while a nurse recorded routine observations. Noah remained cheerful despite feeling tired. He spent most of the appointment telling the doctor detailed facts about dinosaurs. Even the physician laughed. "You may know more about prehistoric animals than I do," he admitted. Noah grinned proudly. Several basic tests were ordered as a precaution. Blood work, standard screenings. Nothing unusual. Ethan remained beside Noah the entire time. Nia watched quietly from the corner of the room. The connection between them was impossible to ignore. Whatever the truth turned out to be, Ethan's devotion was real. An hour later, while waiting for preliminary results, the doctor reviewed Noah's medical file. "Everything looks good overall," she said. "Although there is one marker I would like to monitor." Ethan immediately straightened. "What marker?" The doctor pointed toward a section on the screen. "A rare hereditary blood characteristic. It is not dangerous. It simply appears in certain family lines more often than others." Nia felt her pulse quicken. "Hereditary?" The doctor nodded. "Yes. We occasionally use it as a supplemental reference during family medical evaluations." Ethan frowned. "But Noah's biological family history is unknown." "That is true." The doctor smiled reassuringly. "Which is why it is mostly a curiosity in this case." She continued explaining other medical details, but Nia barely heard them. Her thoughts were already racing. She knew that marker. Years ago, doctors had mentioned it while reviewing her own family medical records. It was uncommon, not impossible to share with strangers. yet uncommon enough to matter. By the time they returned to the estate, a storm was gathering overhead. Gray clouds rolled across the sky. Wind rippled the surface of the lake. Noah fell asleep in the back seat during the drive home. Ethan carried him inside without waking him. Later that evening, after the house grew quiet, Nia sat alone in her room reviewing everything she had learned. The bracelet, the photograph Noah claimed to have seen, the blood type, Vanessa Whitmore, now the hereditary marker. One coincidence could be dismissed. Two might still be chance. But this many? No. The pattern had become impossible to ignore. Her phone rested beside the laptop. For nearly 10 minutes, she stared at it. Finally, she opened a secure medical testing service she knew from her nursing career. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the information. The answer she needed existed. A definitive answer. Scientific. Unarguable. One test could confirm whether the bond she felt was real or imagined. Whether 5 years of grief had been built on a lie. Nia closed her eyes. She knew crossing this line would change everything. Yet as thunder rumbled softly beyond the lake, she also knew she could not stop now. Somewhere between the mansion, the hospital, and the adoption records, the truth was waiting. And for the first time, she was close enough to reach it. Rain tapped softly against the windows the following evening as Nia sat alone in her room, staring at the testing kit resting on the desk. The small package looked ordinary. Simple. Yet it carried the weight of 5 years of unanswered questions. For several minutes, she did nothing. Her hands remained folded in her lap, while her thoughts moved between hope and fear. If the result came back negative, she would finally have to accept that grief had convinced her to see connections where none existed. If it came back positive, everything would change. Downstairs, she could hear faint laughter drifting through the mansion. Noah and Ethan were finishing dinner. The sound only made the decision harder. Nia closed her eyes and remembered the first moment she had seen the silver bracelet. She remembered Noah's smile. She remembered the strange certainty that had settled over her heart before logic could intervene. Eventually, she stood and slipped the kit into a drawer. She needed to be careful. She needed certainty. Rushing could destroy everything. The next morning arrived bright and clear. The storm had passed, leaving the gardens washed clean beneath the sunlight. Noah spent most of breakfast talking about a science project while Ethan reviewed messages on his tablet. Halfway through the meal, Noah suddenly reached across the table and took Nia's hand. It was an innocent gesture. Natural, yet it caused Ethan to glance up from his screen. "You two have become quite a team," he observed. Noah smiled. "She understands me." Nia laughed softly. "That is because you explain everything in great detail." "Exactly," Noah replied proudly. Ethan shook his head with amusement before returning to work. But Nia noticed something else. He was watching them more often lately. Not suspiciously, thoughtfully, as though he was trying to understand something he could not quite define. Later that afternoon, Noah asked Nia to help organize a box of keepsakes stored in a cabinet near the family room. The assignment seemed harmless. Old drawings, school projects, birthday cards, small treasures collected over the years. They sat together on the floor, sorting through the contents. Then Noah pulled out a worn envelope. "What is this?" he asked. Nia glanced toward it. Her breath caught. Inside the partially opened envelope was a photograph. Not clear enough to reveal much detail from a distance, but enough to show the outline of a hospital room. Before she could look closer, Ethan entered unexpectedly. The moment he saw the envelope, his expression changed. "Where did you find that?" he asked. Noah pointed toward the box. Ethan crossed the room and carefully took the photograph. For a brief second, Nia caught a glimpse of the image. A woman lying in a hospital bed. The picture was slightly blurred, yet something about it felt familiar. Ethan slipped it back into the envelope. "Just paperwork from years ago," he said gently. "Nothing exciting." Noah accepted the explanation and moved on to another item. But Nia noticed Ethan's hand tighten slightly around the envelope before he left the room. The incident stayed with her throughout the day. That evening, after Noah went to bed, Nia found herself returning once more to the questions that refused to leave her alone. Why did adoption documents contain a photograph? Why had Noah once claimed the woman looked like her? And why had Ethan reacted so quickly when the picture appeared? The answers felt close now, closer than ever before. 2 days later, an opportunity finally arrived. Noah lost one of his baby teeth during lunch and proudly carried it around the house for hours. By bedtime, He placed the tiny tooth inside a decorative box beneath his pillow. The moment should have been ordinary. Instead, Nia found herself staring at the small white tooth after Noah fell asleep. Scientific testing no longer felt impossible. It felt necessary. Her pulse raced as she carefully retrieved it and placed it inside a sterile sample envelope from the kit hidden in her room. She stood motionless afterward, looking at the sleeping child. Moonlight spilled across his face. The silver bracelet rested against his chest. Noah shifted, slightly in his sleep, and whispered something she could not quite hear. Then he settled again. Nia stepped quietly from the room. Her hands trembled the entire walk back to her bedroom. Once inside, she sealed the sample and completed the final paperwork. The process was simple, efficient, clinical, yet her heart felt anything but calm. When the package was finally prepared for shipment, she sat beside the window and stared into the darkness beyond the lake. The test was now underway. Within days, she would receive an answer that could either end her search forever or prove that every impossible coincidence had been leading toward the same truth all along. The waiting became its own kind of storm. Every morning Nia checked her email before breakfast. Every evening she looked again before going to bed. The laboratory had estimated several business days, yet each hour felt longer than the last. During that time, life inside the mansion continued as if nothing had changed. Noah returned to his usual energetic self. The fever had disappeared. His laughter once again echoed through the hallways, filling spaces that had probably known too much silence before he arrived. Ethan seemed relieved by the improvement. He smiled more often. He spent less time locked inside his office. One Saturday afternoon, he even canceled a board meeting to take Noah fishing at the lake behind the estate. Nia watched them from the dock. The sunlight danced across the water while Noah proudly announced every fish that escaped his line. Ethan listened with genuine patience. Looking at them together, Nia felt the familiar conflict growing inside her. Part of her desperately wanted answers. Another part feared what those answers might do to the fragile peace surrounding the child. Later that evening, while Noah was drawing pictures in the family room, Ethan received an unexpected visitor. A black sedan arrived shortly before sunset. Through the front windows, Nia watched a woman step out of the vehicle wearing an elegant cream-colored coat. The moment Nia recognized her face, her pulse accelerated. Vanessa Whitmore. She had only seen photographs before, yet there was no doubt. The same, carefully controlled smile. The same polished appearance. The same woman whose image had haunted her memories. Nia immediately moved toward the hallway, careful not to attract attention. Voices drifted from Ethan's private study after the door closed. She could not hear every word. Only fragments. Business. Foundation funding. Upcoming charity events. The conversation sounded ordinary, yet something felt rehearsed beneath the surface. Nearly an hour later, Vanessa emerged from the study. As she crossed the foyer, Noah unexpectedly appeared at the top of the staircase. He had come downstairs looking for a forgotten toy. The moment Vanessa saw him, her smile froze for the briefest second. It was gone almost immediately, replaced by warmth. But Nia noticed. Noah noticed nothing. He simply waved politely before continuing downstairs. Vanessa's gaze followed him. Not affectionately. Not like someone greeting a child she had helped place with a family. Her expression carried something else. Concern. Unease. Almost fear. Before leaving, Vanessa glanced toward Nia. Their eyes met for less than 2 seconds. Yet a strange tension passed between them. Nia suddenly became certain of one thing. Vanessa remembered her. The realization lingered long after the sedan disappeared down the driveway. That night, Nia could not sleep. Shortly after midnight, her phone vibrated on the nightstand. Her breath caught instantly. The laboratory. For several seconds, she simply stared at the notification. Then, with trembling hands, she opened the secure message. The document loaded slowly. Too slowly. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Finally, the report appeared on the screen. She scanned the page once. Then again. Then a third time because her mind refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. Probability of biological maternity, 99.999%. The room seemed to disappear around her. Tears filled her eyes before she even realized they were there. 5 years of grief collapsed into a single moment. 5 years of wondering. 5 years of believing she would never know the truth. Noah was her son. Not symbolically. Not emotionally. Not because she wished it to be true. Scientifically. Definitively. Undeniably. Her son. Nia covered her mouth to stop a sob from escaping. Moonlight spilled across the floor while the report glowed on the screen. She thought she would feel triumph, relief, vindication. Instead, she felt heartbreak, because confirmation only created a larger question. If Noah was truly her child, then how had he ended up here? Who had taken him from the life they should have shared? And why? She sat awake until dawn reading the report over and over again. The numbers never changed. The conclusion remained absolute. When the first rays of sunlight appeared over the lake, Nia quietly walked down the hallway toward Noah's bedroom. She opened the door slightly and looked inside. Noah was still asleep. His stuffed bear rested beneath one arm. The silver bracelet glimmered softly against his chest. For several minutes, she simply stood there, memorizing the sight. Then Noah stirred. His eyes opened slowly. The moment he saw her, he smiled. A sleepy, effortless smile. The kind children reserve for people they trust completely. "Good morning," he whispered. Nia felt fresh tears threaten her composure. "Good morning." Noah stretched and rubbed his eyes. "Why are you looking at me like that?" She swallowed carefully. "Because I am happy you are here." Noah smiled again and reached out his hand. Without thinking, Nia took it. And as the morning sunlight filled the room, she realized her search was no longer about proving who Noah belonged to. She already knew that answer. Now she needed to uncover who had stolen 5 years from both of them. For 3 days, Nia carried the truth alone. The laboratory report remained hidden inside a password-protected folder on her laptop. Every time she looked at Noah, the words returned to her mind with the force of a heartbeat. 99.999%. Her son. The child she had mourned. The child she had believed she would never see again. Yet despite the certainty of the result, she said nothing. Not to Ethan. Not to anyone. She needed more than proof of motherhood now. She needed the entire truth. On the 4th morning, she found Ethan sitting alone on the terrace overlooking the lake. A cup of coffee rested untouched beside him. He appeared distracted, staring across the water as sunlight shimmered across the surface. "You are up early," Nia said. Ethan looked over his shoulder and offered a faint smile. "Could not sleep." "Work?" He shook his head. "Not this time." She sat across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan surprised her. "Do you ever wonder how differently life could have turned out?" Nia felt her pulse quicken. "Sometimes." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "I spent years building companies because it was easier than building relationships." His gaze drifted toward the horizon. Success always made sense. Numbers made sense. People were harder. He laughed softly. "Then one day I woke up and realized I had everything except the thing I actually wanted." "A family," Nia said. Ethan nodded. "A family." The word lingered between them. "When doctors told me I could never have children, I convinced myself it did not matter." His expression darkened slightly. "That was a lie." Nia remained silent. Ethan rarely spoke about himself. The honesty felt unusual. "The adoption changed everything," he continued. "For the first time, I stopped measuring life by achievements." His eyes softened. "Noah became my entire world." Nia lowered her gaze. Every sentence made what she had learned feel heavier. Because the deeper the bond between Ethan and Noah became, the more complicated the truth would be. Later that afternoon, while Ethan attended meetings in the city, Nia finally acted on another question that had haunted her for weeks. She drove to a small records office nearly 40 miles away. The building was old and quiet, tucked between a courthouse and a public library. After several requests and far more paperwork than she expected, she obtained access to archived adoption records connected to the agency that had handled Noah's placement. Hours passed as she reviewed documents. Most revealed nothing useful. Then she found a name. A physician listed among the medical reviewers involved in Noah's case. Dr. Richard Hale. The name struck her immediately. She had seen it before. Her breath caught. She quickly searched older hospital records connected to her own delivery. The same name appeared there as well. Dr. Richard Hale. The connection sent a chill through her. One doctor. 2 lives. 1 child. Nia copied everything she could legally obtain before leaving the office. By the time she returned to the estate, dusk had settled across the property. Ethan's car was already in the driveway. Lights glowed warmly through the windows. She entered quietly and found Noah asleep on the couch beneath a blanket. A movie played softly on television. Ethan sat nearby reading reports. He looked up when she entered. "Long day?" he asked. "Very." Ethan nodded. Then his expression shifted. "Actually, there is something I wanted to ask you." Nia froze. "What is it?" Ethan closed the folder in his lap. "Have you been investigating Noah's past?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Nia forced herself to remain calm. "Why would you ask that?" Ethan studied her carefully. "Because Vanessa called me today." Her heart skipped. Ethan continued. "She said you have been asking questions about adoption records." Silence stretched between them. Nia realized there was no safe answer. Ethan stood and walked toward the window. "I am not angry," he said quietly. "I am confused." He turned back toward her. "If there is something you want to know, why not ask me directly?" Nia looked at Noah sleeping peacefully beneath the blanket. Then she looked at Ethan, the man who loved her son without knowing the truth. The man who believed adoption had given him the family he could never create. The man whose name was now somehow connected to the same doctor who had appeared in her own medical records. She could not tell him everything. "Not yet. I just have questions," she said softly. Ethan nodded, though disappointment flickered across his face. Questions can be dangerous when people only have half the story. Then he glanced toward Noah. "Trust me, I learned that the hard way." Nia watched him walk from the room. The moment he disappeared into the hallway, she opened her folder again and stared at the copied records. One name connected the hospital. One name connected the adoption. One name connected Noah. And for the first time, she began to suspect that the mystery surrounding her son might be even bigger than she imagined. The discovery refused to leave Nia's mind. For the next several days, every path seemed to lead back to the same name. Dr. Richard Hale, the physician connected to her hospital records. The physician connected to Noah's adoption file. The physician who appeared at the exact intersection of two lives that should never have crossed. On a quiet Tuesday morning, after dropping Noah at school and watching Ethan leave for a series of meetings downtown, Nia drove to a medical archives office nearly an hour away. The building sat at the edge of a business district, surrounded by aging brick structures and nearly empty parking lots. Inside, the atmosphere felt frozen in time. Filing cabinets lined long hallways. Old records filled shelves stretching from floor to ceiling. Nia spent hours reviewing public licensing documents, retirement notices, and archived medical publications. Eventually, she found what she had been searching for. Dr. Richard Hale had retired abruptly 4 years ago. No public explanation. No farewell announcement. No professional transition. 1 month, he was active. The next, he was gone. That alone seemed unusual. But the next detail made her pulse quicken. Several months before his retirement, he had served as a consulting physician for a private fertility research initiative funded through one of Ethan Calloway's companies. Nia stared at the document. Ethan's company. Fertility research. Dr. Hale. The pieces shifted again. She quickly photographed the information and continued searching. By late afternoon, she discovered another record. A legal filing involving the closure of a private reproductive health facility. Most names had been sealed or redacted. Yet one remained visible. Richard Hale. Nia leaned back in her chair. A strange feeling settled over her. The story was becoming larger than a single adoption. Larger than a single hospital. Something else had been happening behind the scenes years ago. Something connected to fertility treatment, medical records, and children. By the time she returned to the estate, the sky had darkened. With approaching rain, she found Noah building a blanket fort in the family room. "You are just in time," he announced. "This castle needs protection." Nia smiled and joined him on the floor. For nearly an hour, they sat together arranging pillows and blankets while Noah narrated an elaborate adventure involving dragons, astronauts, and treasure maps. Watching him laugh made the weight of her investigation briefly disappear. Then Ethan arrived home. The moment he stepped into the room, Noah proudly showed off the completed fortress. Ethan examined it with exaggerated seriousness. "I have inspected the structure," he declared. "It appears highly secure." Noah grinned. "You can come inside." Ethan glanced at Nia. "Am I allowed?" "Only if you promise not to rearrange the furniture." For the first time in days, genuine laughter filled the room. Yet later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Ethan unexpectedly knocked on the library door where Nia sat reviewing notes. "Can we talk?" he asked. Something in his voice made her close the laptop immediately. Ethan entered and sat across from her. For several moments, he seemed unsure where to begin. Finally, he exhaled slowly. There is something I have never told many people. Nia remained silent. Ethan looked toward the rain-streaked windows. Years ago, before Noah came into my life, I spent a long time trying to become a father. The confession surprised her. Ethan continued. Doctors told me it was impossible. His expression tightened slightly. I went through evaluations, consultations, treatments. Every specialist had the same answer. Nia's heart began to race. Who gave you that diagnosis? She asked carefully. Ethan laughed without humor. Too many doctors to count. Then he paused. But the one who delivered the final conclusion was Richard Hale. The room seemed to tilt. Ethan did not notice her reaction. He continued staring toward the window. After that, I stopped trying. Eventually, I convinced myself adoption was my only path to having a family. Silence settled between them. Nia could barely process what she had heard. Richard Hale had not only appeared in Noah's records and her own hospital file. He had personally informed Ethan that he could never have children. The coincidence was no longer believable. Ethan stood and walked toward a bookshelf. You know what bothers me most? He asked quietly. I never questioned it. He looked back at her. One doctor's opinion changed the entire direction of my life. Nia swallowed carefully. Maybe some opinions deserve to be questioned. Ethan studied her expression for a moment. Something seemed to flicker behind his eyes. Recognition, suspicion, understanding, perhaps all three. But before he could say anything else, Noah's voice echoed from upstairs. Mr. Ethan? Ethan immediately turned toward the hallway. Coming, buddy. He paused at the door and glanced back one final time. Sometimes I think the past leaves clues because it wants to be found. Then he disappeared up the staircase. Nia sat motionless long after he left. The rain continued tapping against the windows. Richard Hale had told Ethan he could never become a father. Richard Hale had appeared in Noah's adoption records. Richard Hale had been involved in the hospital where Nia gave birth. And suddenly a terrifying possibility began taking shape. What if the biggest lie in this story was not the adoption? What if the biggest lie was the diagnosis that had convinced Ethan his future children could never exist? The possibility followed Nia everywhere. It lingered during breakfast conversations. It echoed through quiet walks around the lake. It sat beside her whenever she watched Noah laughing with Ethan. If Richard Hale had lied about Ethan's infertility, then everything changed. The adoption, the hospital records, the unexplained connections. None of it could be dismissed as coincidence anymore. 3 days later, another piece of the puzzle appeared unexpectedly. Ethan was preparing for a major charity gala hosted by a children's foundation. The event would bring together business leaders, philanthropists, and media organizations from across the state. As staff finalized schedules and security arrangements, Nia glanced at one of the invitation packets resting on the kitchen counter. Her breath caught immediately. The foundation's executive director was Vanessa Whitmore. Once again, the same name, the same woman, the same shadow stretching across every unanswered question. That evening, Ethan found Nia organizing books in the family room. I have a favor to ask, he said. Of course. The gala is this weekend. Noah has been invited because the foundation wants to feature several adoption success stories. Ethan hesitated. I know public events are not exactly his favorite thing. Nia smiled. That is putting it politely. Ethan laughed softly. Would you come with us? The request surprised her. Me? You are the person he trusts most. Ethan's expression grew sincere. Honestly, I think I would feel better if you were there too. Nia agreed, though the decision immediately made her nervous. A gala organized by Vanessa Whitmore might provide answers. It might also create complications she was not prepared for. The following afternoon brought another unexpected development. Noah returned from school carrying a family heritage assignment. Students had been asked to collect information about their relatives and create a presentation. The moment Noah opened the folder, his excitement faded. I cannot do this, he said quietly. Nia sat beside him at the dining table. Why not? Noah looked down. Everybody else knows where they come from. The sadness in his voice broke her heart. Ethan entered the room just in time to hear the conversation. For several seconds, he stood silently. Then he pulled out a chair and sat beside Noah. Where you come from matters, Ethan said gently. But it is not the only thing that matters. Noah stared at the worksheet. What if I never know? Ethan looked away briefly. Nia noticed the pain crossing his face. Sometimes families are built in unexpected ways, he replied. Noah nodded. but the answer clearly did not satisfy him. Later that night, after Noah had gone to bed, Ethan remained in the dining room staring at the unfinished assignment. "He deserves answers," he said quietly. Nia felt her chest tighten. "Yes." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "I have tried for years to learn more about his biological history." He looked exhausted. Every trail ended in sealed records and missing information. Nia's pulse quickened. Missing information? Ethan nodded. Entire sections of his file were unavailable. He laughed bitterly. For a child whose history was supposedly documented, there were surprisingly few documents. The statement confirmed something Nia had already begun to suspect. Someone had not simply hidden the truth. Someone had carefully removed it. The next morning, while reviewing notes from her investigation, Nia received an unexpected email from a retired administrator who had once worked at the hospital where Noah was born. She had contacted dozens of former employees over the past several weeks. Most never responded. This one did. The message was brief. Very brief. Yet it contained a detail that made her heart race. 5 years earlier, several patient files had been transferred from standard hospital archives into a restricted review process supervised directly by Dr. Richard Hale. Among those records was Nia's file. Her hands trembled as she reread the email. Richard Hale had not merely appeared in her story. He had actively controlled parts of it. Before she could process the discovery further, another line caught her attention. A second file had been reviewed during the same period. The name attached to that file was Ethan Calloway. Nia stared at the screen. Her breath became shallow. The same doctor. The same time frame. The same review process. Her medical records and Ethan's records had crossed paths years before either of them ever knew Noah existed. Outside her window, sunlight shimmered across the lake. Inside the mansion, Noah's laughter echoed from the garden below. Yet for Nia, everything had changed once again. Because for the first time, she was no longer looking at separate mysteries. She was looking at a single story. A story that had connected her, Ethan, and Noah from the very beginning. The night of the gala arrived beneath a sky filled with golden city lights and distant stars. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance of the Grand Harbor Ballroom, while photographers documented the arrival of executives, philanthropists, and public figures. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast warm reflections across polished floors. Conversations flowed easily. Laughter mixed with the soft sound of a string quartet. To everyone else, it looked like a celebration. To Nia, it felt like the center of a storm. Noah stood between her and Ethan near the entrance, dressed in a navy suit that made him look impossibly grown up. He looked around the ballroom with wide eyes. "This place is huge," he whispered. Ethan smiled. "That is usually what people say when they come here." Noah grinned. "I feel important." "You are important," Ethan replied immediately. The answer came without hesitation. Nia watched the exchange quietly. The truth she carried felt heavier than ever. Across the ballroom, Vanessa Whitmore moved through the crowd with practiced elegance. She greeted donors, posed for photographs, and accepted compliments about the foundation's work. From a distance, she looked exactly like the public image she had spent years building. Compassionate, respected, untouchable. Yet Nia could no longer see the image. She only saw the questions hiding behind it. As the evening continued, guests gathered near the main stage for presentations honoring adoption success stories and charitable achievements. Noah had been invited as part of a featured segment highlighting children who had found permanent homes. When his name appeared on the screen, polite applause filled the room. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on Noah's shoulder. Pride shone openly in his eyes. Then something unexpected happened. During the presentation, a retired hospital administrator approached Nia. She immediately recognized him from several emails they had exchanged over recent weeks. The elderly man appeared nervous. "Miss Brooks," he said quietly, "there is something you should know." Nia's pulse quickened. "What is it?" He glanced around carefully before speaking. "I was reviewing archived records after your inquiry." His voice lowered further. The files connected to Richard Hale were not the only unusual records. Nia felt her breath catch. "What do you mean?" The man swallowed. Several fertility evaluations were altered during that period. The ballroom noise seemed to fade around her. "Altered?" "Yes." He hesitated. "Including one involving Ethan Calloway." For a moment, Nia could not move. The administrator reached into his jacket and carefully handed her a folded copy of an archived memorandum. I cannot officially discuss it, he said. But I thought you deserved to know. Then he quietly disappeared into the crowd. Nia stared at the document. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The memorandum was brief. Internal. Easy to overlook. Yet one sentence changed everything. A review had identified discrepancies in diagnostic reporting connected to several fertility patients overseen by Richard Hale. One of those patients was Ethan Calloway. Nia closed her eyes. The final barrier had just fallen. The diagnosis Ethan had trusted. The diagnosis that shaped his future. The diagnosis that convinced him he could never become a father. It had been wrong. Or worse, deliberately altered. A wave of emotion swept through her. Suddenly the entire story became visible. Noah had not simply been adopted by a man longing for a child. Noah had been placed into the life of the very father who had been told fatherhood was impossible. The cruelty of it stole her breath. Across the ballroom, Ethan stood beside Noah speaking with guests. He had no idea that the child he loved might be connected to him in a way he had spent years believing impossible. No idea that his own medical history sat at the center of the mystery. Nia looked down at the memorandum again. Then another realization struck her. If Ethan's diagnosis had been manipulated, then there was only one way to know the full truth. A second DNA test. Not between her and Noah. Between Ethan and Noah. The thought sent a tremor through her entire body. Because she already knew what her instincts were telling her. The same instincts that had recognized the bracelet. The same instincts that had refused to accept coincidence. The same instincts that had led her this far. Across the room, Noah suddenly spotted her and waved enthusiastically. Ethan followed his gaze. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, something passed between them. An unspoken understanding. Ethan could tell something had changed. He excused himself from the conversation and walked toward her. Are you all right? He asked. Nia looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who had unknowingly spent years loving his own son. The man whose life had been built around a lie he never questioned because he trusted the people responsible for helping him. Emotion tightened her throat. I do not know, she answered honestly. Ethan frowned. What happened? Nia glanced toward Noah, standing beneath the ballroom lights. Then she looked back at Ethan. The memorandum remained folded in her hand. The truth was no longer approaching. It had arrived. And before this night was over, she knew there was only one question left that truly mattered. Not who Noah belonged to, not who had taken him, but whether Ethan Calloway was finally ready to learn that the family he spent years searching for might have been standing beside him all along. The gala ended, but the truth did not wait. 2 days later, Ethan sat inside a private medical office staring at a sealed envelope resting on the desk between him and a genetic specialist. Outside the window, morning sunlight reflected from neighboring buildings. Inside the room, silence felt almost unbearable. Nia sat across from him. Neither had spoken much during the drive. After the gala, she had finally shown him the memorandum. She had shown him the evidence connected to Richard Hale. She had told him about the questions that refused to disappear. Most difficult of all, she had told him about the DNA test proving Noah was her son. Ethan had listened without interrupting. He had not become angry. He had not accused her of lying. He had simply grown quieter with every new revelation. Now only one answer remained. The specialist opened the file and reviewed the results. His voice was calm and professional. The analysis is conclusive. Ethan stared at the table. Nia felt her heart pounding against her ribs. There is a 99.999% probability of paternity. The words settled over the room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared ahead, as though the meaning needed time to reach him. Then he lowered his head and covered his eyes with one hand. Nia watched emotion cross his face. Shock, grief, relief, disbelief. Years of certainty collapsing all at once. He is my son, Ethan whispered. The specialist nodded. Yes. Ethan laughed softly, but there was heartbreak inside the sound. All these years. His voice cracked. All these years I believed he could never exist. Nia felt tears fill her own eyes. Not because she had been proven right. Because she finally understood the magnitude of what had been stolen from both of them. Later that afternoon, they returned to the estate. Noah was in the garden building a model rocket when their car pulled into the driveway. He looked up immediately and ran toward them. You are back. Ethan stepped out first. For a moment, he simply stood there looking at the child. looking at his son. Not an adoption story. Not a miracle that arrived from nowhere. His son. Noah slowed slightly. Mr. Ethan? Ethan knelt in front of him. Emotion filled his eyes. Hey, buddy. Noah studied his face. Are you okay? Ethan smiled through tears. I think I am better than okay. Noah glanced toward Nia, confused but trusting. Then Ethan opened his arms. Noah stepped forward without hesitation. Ethan held him tightly. Not because he was afraid Noah would disappear. Because for the first time he understood what he had been holding all along. Weeks passed. Investigations expanded. Additional records surfaced. Independent reviews confirmed that Richard Hale had manipulated medical findings involving multiple patients before his retirement. Regulatory agencies reopened dormant cases. Vanessa Whitmore resigned from the foundation shortly afterward as questions surrounding adoption procedures and record handling continued to grow. Nia did not celebrate any of it. Neither did Ethan. Their focus remained elsewhere. On healing. On rebuilding. On giving Noah the truth he deserved. The conversations were careful and age-appropriate. Noah learned that the people he loved had discovered something important. He learned that families sometimes lose their way before finding each other again. Most importantly, he learned that he had always been loved. 1 year later, the first day of school arrived beneath a bright September sky. Children filled the sidewalks carrying backpacks nearly as large as themselves. Parents waved from parking lots and school entrances. Noah stood proudly in a new blue jacket, gripping his backpack straps. The silver bracelet still hung around his neck. It always would. Nia stood on one side of him. Ethan stood on the other. For a moment, none of them moved. The school bell rang in the distance. Noah looked up at both of them. You know everybody is staring, right? Ethan laughed. Probably. Because you are both acting weird. Nia smiled. We are just proud of you. Noah considered that. Then he reached out and took both their hands. One in his right, one in his left. Good, he said. Because I am proud of you too. The simplicity of the statement left both adults speechless. Together they walked toward the entrance. Morning sunlight illuminated the path ahead. Around them, families came and went. Ordinary moments. Ordinary lives. Yet for Nia, the scene felt extraordinary. 5 years earlier, she had believed her story ended in loss. Ethan had believed his story ended with impossibility. Instead, both roads had led here. To a little boy walking confidently between them. To truth finally uncovered. To a family rebuilt not by chance, but by courage. And as Noah stepped through the school doors, still holding both their hands until the last possible second, all three finally knew exactly where they belonged.